Today I'm sharing a very easy to use stencil, die, and stamp set that lets you create gorgeous blooms with only a few colors of ink. To see this card project come together, stick around. That video is coming up next. Here's a look at the products I'm using today from Altenew. This is the Rose Reverie Build a Garden collection. It also comes with a brush, and we've got the big stamp and die plus the stencils. So this cuts out the flower, and it's great because there are all these little all-purpose greetings, and the Build a Garden sets are designed to take some of the guesswork out. So we're going to get started with stamping. I have one panel of 4¼ by 5½ cardstock, which will fit this bloom perfectly. Now I'm putting it in the corner because initially I thought I'm going to stamp and then I wanted to leave my stamp on the board, but I changed my mind because sometimes you can do that. If you leave your stamp in the right position, right, you can restamp once you're done. Now I'm using the stamp conditioning eraser to prime the stamp only because it's the first time I'm using it. You can also use your hands for this. And I'll be stamping with the Altenew Obsidian. I love this black ink. It is so crisp. The only drawback is you have to let it dry. And I didn't quite let it dry long enough, but we'll talk about that later. It didn't affect it in the end. Now you can also hit it with a heat tool and facilitate the drying, but sometimes I just let it dry while I work on other things or just stare at it while it's drying, because that's a thing you can do. Yeah. So giving it that extra pressure, I got ink on my hand and I wanted to remove that because that's how ink shows up where ink shouldn't be. All right, so I decided just to leave that on the stamp wheel, but I'm not going to come back to it. Now we can proceed with allowing this to dry and then moving on to the blends. I decided I was going to die cut it first before ink blending. Now I did think that I had waited long enough for it to dry, but here's the thing that you want to do. When you cut something out, always double check your plate. See that black plate, the magnetic one? Turns out there was ink on it, and I'll find that out in a little bit, but pigment ink really does require time to dry. So we're sticking our things down here on our sticky mat, and that's where I noticed, you can't really see it, but I spritzed it on and wiped that ink off. Now I thought I had it all. I did have it all there, but I forgot to clean off the dye, and I'll show you that later. So one of the things I love about Altenew is you get these guides, and I tend to just follow the guides. So I picked colors from this little panel to do my card. So I've got everything set up here with my sticky mat. And one of the things I like is you can actually stick your ink pads right down to the mat while you're working. I've pulled all of my brushes out. I don't need more than 2, but I just like to show this because it's from Altenew and it's really cute. That makes me happy. It's the little things. I used to put stickers on all of my brushes, but I've recently just switched over to just look at something that looks pink and then you start to blend. I like having the piece die cut first because it gives your stencil more to grip onto the mat. And also, then once you've done all your blending, you don't run the risk of messing up the die cut. But again, I'm just going to follow these colors and try to copy this technique, which is just taking the blush rose, going deeper on each petal, and allowing some white to remain. Now, this is kind of hard to do at first because your inclination is to fill all of this space on the stencil. So I'm looking at that thinking, is that really what I want to do? Do I want to leave it that open and white? But it creates such a cool look when it's done. So I kept glancing over at the sample on the packaging to guide where I went darker and where I left the light. Now, in between each stencil, I will clean them off with a little spritz of rubbing alcohol. I just keep some in a little bottle and I clean as I go. Stencil 2, same thing. So once you get the groove, it's pretty easy to do, but I actually brought in a smaller brush because some of these areas are a little smaller and it can be a little tricky to get that darker and lighter look without a smaller brush. So sometimes a smaller brush is helpful, and I do like these micro brushes. All right, we're going to continue adding the color. This is a really easy stencil set to use. There are no little fiddly areas that are hard to fill in or that you have to worry that you're going to go underneath part of the stencil. And I love that. So this kind of feels like a really good beginner set to play with in terms of layered stencils. I love layered stencils because I don't like to color things by hand. And normally, if I saw a big bloom like this, I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot Copic marker. But when I have coloring stencils, it makes all the difference in the world. I mean, look at how beautiful this is so far with one ink color. Now here's where the leaves show up at first, and as I'm adding this pink, I actually started to think, okay, what are we doing for the greens again? So I had 3 shades. I pull in Mossy Meadow to start, went dark at the base, and then let it go a little lighter at the top. And as soon as I had done that, I thought, well, where would I put the other colors? I don't, maybe I'm not that sophisticated when it comes to ink blending, but I really just think this is all you need. And that is one of the beautiful things about not needing every single ink color. A couple ink colors are all I'm going to use on this card. For the core, I am going to stamp one more color with a little detail, but it shocked me just by going really dark at certain points and leaving the white and light, you create so much depth. Now here I accidentally went over a part that was supposed to be green right there. So my solution, just go over it really heavily with the Mossy Meadow, and you'll never even know that I thought that was part of the petal. You can do that. You can do that when you're covering a lighter color with a darker. It's kind of hard to work in the reverse, but I just kept with the single green and really love the way the bloom looks. Isn't that pretty? I mean, come on, I just did that. Love how that looks. Okay, close enough. I think mine has more depth and color, so I'm very proud of me. And I did not even use the other 2 that I pulled. I did not need them, and so that's the 2 we went with. Now to stamp a greeting, I grabbed some black cardstock, and I'm just going to pull a few off at once. I like to hedge my bets when I'm not sure of what I want to use. So I always recommend stamp a bunch at once. The best case scenario, they all work great and you have choices. The worst case scenario, only one of them turns out, and that's the one you're going to use. So I got this all set up. And of course, I primed these a little because they had not been stamped with before. So I used my stamp conditioning eraser. I have some clear ink and white powder. And now I'll just use my anti-static powder here to prep the paper. And as you will see, I probably could have put more down, but this just happens with dark cardstock, especially black cardstock. Just seems to grab embossing powder like there's no tomorrow. So we'll have to dust some away, but that's okay. I'm going to only make one pass on this because I don't want to overstamp these. They're kind of delicate. And now I will get my powder ready and sprinkle it on. This is Alabaster from Brutus Monroe, and there was powder everywhere. It was sticking like there was no tomorrow, and that just happens. So even the best of plans mislaid Wade. I don't know the saying. I'm not versed on sayings, but it just didn't work the way I thought it was going to. So that's when I bring out my brush and I have this angled shader and I use it to just get in there and get all those extra bits off. Took a little time, but once it's cleaned up, then those little bits of embossing powder are not going to show up when you heat set. And it seems like there's always a few pieces that just pop and seem to come alive and start glowing. And then you're like, oh, that's where I missed. But this turned out just fine. And as soon as it's cool, you can wipe away the anti-static powder that makes it look cloudy. I find that my hands are the best way to do that because now the oils in your hands are fine. Now you don't have to worry about it. Go ahead and rub them in, get your DNA on there, and you are good to go. So I'll use some sentiment label dies that I have from Simon Says Stamp to cut these out. I decided I was going to skip that center greeting because I actually missed a few little areas on there. But I think having two choices is great. I really thought I was going to go with the thinking of you, even though I did not vertically center that cut perfectly. But as you'll see, sometimes you don't know until you get there. And again, that's why we have extras. I decided not to notch the edge, instead opting for just a straight cut. I love to use my little trimmer for this because it lets me get them nice and even. And I'll set those aside while I add the final detail to the floral bloom, and that is some little center details. And you can look on the sample to see where to place them. I was a little off on the lower one, but here I am going to bring in one of the darker shades. I didn't have the color recommended, but I had something close. So I'll prime these up, and then I'm going to take this raw amber just to bring in a little detail. It does make a difference. It just adds a little something. And I probably would have been fine with one pass. I just went for two. You don't always need two, but I think it's just stamping force of habit, right? But there you go. The details are on. Now I will prepare my note card. This is going to be top folding, USA 2, so the finished size will be 4¼ wide by 5½ tall. And I'll tape it closed because, I like my things to be flat when I am adding my design. And look at how perfectly that fits. I am going to cut another layer, however, of that full floral die cut just to kind of build it up and give it a little more heft. When I cut an extra layer, see that black right there? That's from the die. So sometimes with pigment ink, you have to clean your dies off as well. So keep that in mind because here it doesn't matter, but I could have transferred that to another cut that I had done and it wouldn't have looked good. I'm just adding some liquid glue here, and then I will stack these two together, and it just gives it a nice bit of lift off of the panel, but it's not popped up, so it won't be super bulky. And now I'll just add liquid glue to the back here, and then we'll pop the greeting on. I like that greeting. The thinking of you felt a little small for some reason. Even though I like a minimal greeting, I thought that the bigger one was more appropriate. So we'll glue that on, just like that. Now I'm obsessed with this gouache, so I'm going to add a little spatter. And that is way too much, as you will see, but I add a little bit of water, a number 2 brush, and just tap some on at the bottom and the top. I'm getting way better at this too, by the way. Like the control that I'm starting to feel with tapping, it's just practice. When I first started tapping, I really didn't know what I was doing. You can also use like little bits of paper to mask off areas you don't want it to go, but I thought my spatter looked pretty good. I'll add liquid glue to the foam squares because I just want to have that little bit of float time. I can position my greeting, bring in my T-square, and just make sure that's straight. To finish off this card, little black enamel dots. I thought that would look very nice. Got way too much glue on that first one, but 5 is, boop, a magic number, and I love the way they cascade and run down the card. I used the pointy side of my Craft Perfect Picker just to get some of that extra glue off. Now let's do a design review. So I'm going to bring my grid in here just to show you how the spaces divide, right? It's a 9-quadrant grid with columns, and it's really for photography, but it works great, I think, in card making with the columns and okay. So the greeting is in the lower third. It's not right on those 2 intersecting points, which might have been a better visual placement, but it depends on your image. And I wanted to cover up some of those little white openings, and so that's why I placed it there. We have spatter in opposing corners and, a little here and there, but then there's white open space on the other 2 opposing corners. So we really have this sort of diagonal connection going on this panel. And most of it is in 2 of the 3 columns. And that's just sort of how it plays out. So this is asymmetrical. You cannot just divide this in the center and it's all the same from side to side. Love the balance on this. And of course, we have all of our bits of repetition, right? We have our black, the stamp ink, the spatter, the enamel dots. It's a great way to tie everything together. And we have our pinks and our greens. So this is really a simple example of a very cohesive design based on the fact that you had a big, beautiful bloom to start with. And I think they're so easy to work with as well. And that is why I think a little set like this is a great introduction to this Craft a Garden series. All right, we are done. And you can find links to all of the products I used in today's video in the YouTube description box. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, I'd love to have you, so please hit that subscribe button and be sure to hit the notification bell so that you don't miss the next time I post. Here is another video featuring Ulta new stencils that you might be interested in checking out. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.